Science is a living body of information that's not static, it's not fixed. It's designed to be constantly updated when new discoveries come to light.
One of the things that's echoed in the ancient stories around the world, whether it's Plato talking about Atlantis, or the ancient Egyptians in the Temple of Sais, is that we find that they discuss how the civilizations have been destroyed from periods of great flooding, but also extreme heat and fire. It's about a totality of all of these different catastrophic events that have led to the disappearance and destruction of these pre-Diluvian civilizations.
There are petroglyphs all over the world with the same exact shapes telling us that this was a worldwide plasma event that was documented and recorded by countless cultures, including the people of Easter Island and their Rongo script.
There's no cultural memory in humanity of how they made these megalithic structures. There's no recollection of the engineering technology that's required to create these structures because it wasn't their technology. It was the gods' technology. That's why we can't do it again.
We're writing a new story right now. We have to, because the evidence no longer supports the story of the past. This is where our new story begins.
My name is David Hatcher Childress, and my area of research is ancient civilizations and megaliths. I'm an author on a wide variety of books, of over 20 different books on mysteries of the past, lost cities, the Olmecs, megaliths in South America and all over the world. I went to high school in Missoula, Montana, and I was a grocery bagger at a supermarket. And I would buy books from the supermarket. Some of the books that I would buy were Eric von Däniken's books on Chariots of the Gods and the Gold of the Gods, which was about these mysterious tunnels in South America. And I liked reading those books. But I think what was interesting about archaeological mysteries was that unlike a UFO or some Bigfoot sighting or some other oddball event, with archaeological mysteries, these are things that you can visit at any time of your choosing. And they're giant structures that generally aren't going anywhere. And unlike a UFO event, again, or a Bigfoot sighting, if there's some mystery associated with, say, some giant pyramid or wall or statue someplace, this is something that you can actually go and investigate yourself. And that intrigued me. I already liked to travel and go to places and was relatively well versed in many of these sites, although there are so many. I'm still learning about all kinds of interesting sites around the world. I think of myself as a scientifically minded person. I don't just believe everything that's strange or weird. I want to see proof of claims that people make. And I'm the kind of person who likes to go and see things for myself. And so that's what got me going. And I began to travel around the world starting in the mid-70s. What really got me going on my latest book, which is called The Lost World of the Cham, was I made a trip to Vietnam. And on that trip, I was visiting Da Nang, and I visited the Campa city of My Son, which is there in the central Vietnam. And I was very surprised at the things that I encountered there, because what was at My Son were things that I hadn't expected to see, really. And that was, first of all, megalithic building with granite and basalt, and also something very important to me, which are these distinctive keystone cuts. And so when I saw the keystone cuts at My Son, I immediately recognized them as the same keystone cuts on structures I had seen in Peru and Bolivia. And I've also noticed these keystone cuts at other sites as well. But to me, this was very important. And I realized that these Cham people, and also known as the Campa, were a civilization that was a megalithic civilization, was using keystone cuts, just like in South America and in Egypt and other areas. and that they were these great seafarers who built huge cities all over Vietnam, and I discovered other places. And they used a base of islands known as the Cham Islands. The Cham Islands are a small group of islands off of the coast of central Vietnam. And although there are not megalithic structures there, those islands were a place where I discovered, as I started my research, that this giant fleet of ships would congregate several times a year at the Cham Islands. And then these fleets would then go out into the Pacific or different places. They would go north to China, they would go south to Java and Sumatra, they would go to India and even apparently across the Indian Ocean to East Africa. And I quickly concluded that the Cham were also going across the Pacific and were probably somehow involved with the Olmecs of ancient Mexico, also the mysterious San Agustin culture in Colombia, also cultures in Peru, like the structures we see in Cuzco and Machu Picchu too, or Ollantaytambo, and because we find these keystone cuts there. So once I had discovered the Cham and what was going on with their megalith building and particularly the keystone cuts, I realized that there was some connection here between the Cham and South America and all of Southeast Asia. So this began what was years of research for me. A new city had become available for tourists a few years ago, which is in the very northern part of Cambodia. It's right on the border of Cambodia and Thailand. And that is a mountainous area with big, high mountains that are jungle covered and big valleys. And the Thai government and the Cambodian government have had a dispute for decades over who controls this area of very northern Cambodia. And the thing is, there's a megalithic city there on top of this mountain. And that city is called Preah Vihear. And until just a few years ago, no tourists could visit Preah Vihear because of the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. The United Nations ruled in a final ruling, and they'd actually made this ruling decades before, but Thailand had not accepted it, and they said, Preah Vihear is in Cambodia, and it's not part of Thailand. And at that point, the Thai military stopped shelling the Cambodian military, they were on two mountainsides across a valley. And once that conflict stopped, the Cambodian government began to allow tourists to go to Preah Vihear, although you still had to go with a military escort to the mountain, and you had to register. So I was able to do all this, and I visited Preah Vihear. And what I found at Preah Vihear also astonished me. Here was a megalithic city built out of granite on top of a mountain. And also at Preah Vihear were the same keystone cuts that I was seeing at My Son in Vietnam. And those are basically T-shaped. Keystone cut like that would be a double T because the keystone has to span two different stones. Molten metals are then poured into these cuts to make a span. So it's either usually a T-shaped cut or it's an hourglass type cut. So they had this at Preah Vihear too. What is also at Preah Vihear, and much of that city is in ruins, is there is a big wall of 3 windows, and it's a megalithic wall built out of granite. And that wall is virtually identical to a famous wall at Machu Picchu in Peru. And that wall is known as the Wall of 3 Windows. And it's a part of Machu Picchu that's at the very top. So I realized that Preah Vihear was almost identical to Machu Picchu in Peru. They were very, very similar. So once I had seen Priya and with all my travels, I realized that yes, there was a total connection between the Cham of Vietnam, also Cambodia, being named after Cambodia, after the Cham, and in fact it's known that Cham people and the Cham language was spoken in Cambodia. But as I began the research, what surprised me was that there's not really a good prehistory of Southeast Asia. What really surprised me was that in Southeast Asia, there was no civilization that anyone had identified that really goes back to any time before Christ. The Campa themselves are said to really exist around, the earliest inscription they find, which is at Mison, is around 192 AD. So modern historians, what I discovered, are placing the Cham and the Campa in just a very small part of central Vietnam. And areas like Cambodia and southern Thailand and Malaysia and Sumatra and Java and Borneo and all these areas of Southeast Asia, according to mainstream historians, there's no civilization there. There's nothing they can speak about. They can't ascribe any cities or structures to any civilization that is BC in Southeast Asia. That really astonished me, that essentially the history of Southeast Asia was completely missing. What was going on in 500 BC or even 200 BC in Southeast Asia is completely unknown. And mainstream historians are essentially saying that nothing was happening in Southeast Asia and that there were no empires or cohesive civilizations that were ruling this area. And that didn't make sense to me. I couldn't see how that could possibly be. And so as my research into the Cham and Campa extended, what I realized was that all of Southeast Asia, from Sumatra to Java to Malaysia and southern Thailand, and of course Cambodia, and southern Vietnam, and islands like southern Philippines, all this area was controlled by the Cham. And in fact, in my research, I found that the Cham language was known to be spoken in northern Sumatra. So here we have, at the very least, the Cham are not just in Vietnam, they're in Sumatra too. There are structures. One interesting structure is in Java. It's called Borobudur. Borobudur is probably the main tourist site today on the island of Java in Indonesia. Borobudur is a gigantic megalithic mandala built as a mountain. It was covered in a lava flow, actually, at one point, and then became ruins, and it was rediscovered in the mid-1800s. But even today, no one knows who built Borobudur. It's a tourist site. When you get to Borobudur, you walk up into this mandala. You're supposed to walk it in a certain way around it as walking mandala. And you get to the top, and there's these small Buddhas sitting in these small stupas that look like flying saucers. And each of these small flying saucer stupas has a statue of the Buddha inside it. It's very well made. Every statue is perfect. It's a really excellent stonework of the best kind. And there are also keystone cuts at Borobudur as well, and they're hourglass type keystone cuts. What I'm learning from the Cham and from all these studies is that the whole world was connected in ancient times, and people were traveling across both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. And in fact, who the Cham were is really significant. The Cham, although they were in Vietnam and they interacted a lot with China, they were really Hindus. Their culture that they had was completely Hindu. They worshipped Shiva and all of the Hindu gods, Parvati, their statuary. Everything was Hindu, almost identical to what you would see in India, really. But the Cham did something also unusual. They were Shivites. Shivites wear their hair long, they grow very long hair, the men, and then they tie it up on top of their head in a bun. So when you go to Easter Island and you see the statues there, they are Shivites. They have long ears, which is how Shiva and Buddha are always depicted, with very long earlobes. And they're apparently cone heads as well, those statues. But on Easter Island, what they would do is they would quarry the giant statues at a volcano and sort of in the center of the island, and then they would move the statues to the outer edge of the island, facing inland, and then they would put a red top knot on top of the head. And it was, it's the same thing of the Shivites tying their hair as a bun on top of their head. So that's where I realized that the statues at Easter Island are also of the Cham. I really feel that it's important for us to understand the ancient past and where we've been, where we've come from, what our civilization was in the past, and how worldwide it was. And by understanding the past, that helps us understand who we are now and our connection to people all over the world and to so many cultures. And by understanding who we are now and where we've been in the past, I believe this can help us as we go forward, and ultimately how our future as the United States and the whole world is one where we are all one. We're coming out of largely the same ancient culture, and hopefully we will go forward in that same way.
Common people around the world are doing the uncommon.
I mean, it is literally the Netflix of spirituality.